The silence in the penthouse was thick as Olivia Harper stared at Ethan Lancaster, trying to comprehend what he had just asked her. "Excuse me?" she asked cautiously, setting down the last of the envelopes. Ethan twirled the gold-embossed invitation between his fingers. "I have an event to attend. I need a date. You'll do?" "You'll do?" Olivia nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. She was his maid, for God's sake, not a socialite or an escort. She had spent the last 2 years cleaning his penthouse, organizing his papers, and ensuring everything ran smoothly in his meticulously controlled world. But attending a wedding, that was an entirely different game. "Mr. Lancaster, I think you might have mistaken me for someone else." Ethan's smirk didn't waver. "I haven't. And before you refuse—" He pulled out a checkbook, scribbled something down, and slid it across the table. Olivia barely glanced at it before looking back at him, unimpressed. "Is this supposed to convince me?" Ethan arched an eyebrow. "It's enough to cover your mother's medical bills for the next 6 months, and that college course you've been saving up for." The air between them shifted. Olivia's fingers curled against her palm. How did he know about that? Of course, she shouldn't have been surprised. Ethan Lancaster was a man who prided himself on control. If he wanted something, he made sure he had all the leverage he needed to get it. "I'm not for sale, Mr. Lancaster," Olivia said, her voice cool. Ethan leaned forward, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "I'm not asking you to be. This isn't a negotiation, Olivia. It's an opportunity." She swallowed. He wasn't wrong about one thing. The money would change everything. Her mother's condition was worsening, and despite working herself to the bone, Olivia could barely keep up with the expenses. She had been taking online business courses, hoping to start something of her own one day. But every spare dollar she had went into hospital bills. One night, one event, and she could change the course of her life. Yet something inside her screamed that getting involved with Ethan Lancaster, no matter how temporary, was a dangerous game. "Why me?" she finally asked. Ethan hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "Because you're different," Olivia frowned. "Different how?" "You're not one of them." He said it like a fact, not a compliment. "And that's exactly what I need." For a moment, Olivia considered walking away. She could tell him to shove his check and his ridiculous idea and pretend this conversation never happened. But then she thought about her mother and her future, and the way Ethan Lancaster looked at her, as if he already knew she'd say yes. She lifted her chin, straightening her posture. "Fine," she said. "But let's get one thing straight. This doesn't make me yours." Ethan's smirk widened. "Of course not. Liar." The next morning, a sleek black car arrived outside Olivia's small Brooklyn apartment. She barely had time to process what she had agreed to before she was ushered into the back seat by a sharply dressed driver. The city blurred past as they drove toward Manhattan's Upper East Side, the buildings growing taller, the streets quieter. When they finally stopped, Olivia stepped out to find herself in front of a boutique that screamed wealth. Inside, a woman in a fitted black dress greeted her with a critical eye. "Miss Harper? We've been expecting you." Olivia's stomach tightened. What had she gotten herself into? The boutique smelled of luxury, polished marble floors, velvet drapes, and perfume that lingered in the air like a silent promise of perfection. Olivia Harper had never set foot in a place like this, and she felt every bit the outsider. The woman in black, who introduced herself as Claudia Westwood, a renowned stylist, examined Olivia as if she were a project waiting to be refined. "Miss Harper, we have a lot of work to do," Claudia said, pursing her lips. Olivia folded her arms. "I don't need to be transformed. I just need a dress." Claudia let out a light, condescending chuckle. Oh, sweetheart, you need much more than that. If you're going to stand beside Ethan Lancaster, you need to be convincing. That word irked Olivia more than she cared to admit. But before she could say something she might regret, the double doors swung open, and Ethan walked in like he owned the place, which, knowing him, he probably did. How's our Cinderella doing? He asked, smirking as he took a seat in one of the velvet chairs. Olivia shot him a glare. I didn't agree to be a charity case. Ethan chuckled. Relax. This isn't charity, Olivia. It's an investment. She bristled at the word. An investment. Like she was just another deal in his endless portfolio. Claudia clapped her hands. Enough chatter. Let's get started. Over the next few hours, Olivia was subjected to an exhausting makeover boot camp. Silk gowns, diamond accessories, perfume that smelled like old money. It was too much, but every time she protested, Ethan just raised an eyebrow and said, You agreed to this. At one point, Claudia handed her a pair of 6-inch stilettos. Absolutely not, Olivia said. I'd like to leave the wedding with my ankles intact. Ethan, who had been watching in amusement, finally stood up. She doesn't need those. Give her something she can actually walk in. Claudia looked like he had just committed a crime against fashion, but she obeyed. Olivia shot him a look. Surprised you care. Ethan smirked. I can't have you tripping and making me look bad, can I? Her stomach twisted. Why did he always do that? Show these fleeting moments of consideration, only to dismiss them with arrogance? By the time they were done, Olivia barely recognized herself. She stared at the mirror, seeing a woman who looked polished, elegant, powerful. Ethan stood behind her, his gaze unreadable. Not bad, he murmured. For the first time, Olivia wasn't sure if he was talking about the transformation or something else entirely. After the exhausting day, Olivia returned to her small apartment in Brooklyn, the weight of the deal settling in. Margaret Hayes, her next-door neighbor and a retired journalist, noticed her silence. You look troubled, dear. Olivia sighed. Let's just say, I made a deal with the devil. Margaret chuckled. Men like Ethan Lancaster don't make deals, Olivia. They make claims. Be careful he doesn't turn you into something you're not. The word stuck with her. Because deep down, Olivia wasn't sure if she was doing this for the money or for something far more dangerous. The next morning, Olivia woke up to a knock on her door. Ethan, what are you doing here? She asked. Still in her pajamas, he smirked. You didn't think I'd let you sleep in, did you? We have work to do. Work? He handed her a sleek black envelope. Inside was an itinerary. 8 a.m. Breakfast with an etiquette coach. 11 a.m. High society behavior training. 3 p.m. PR and media handling. Olivia blinked. You've got to be kidding me. Ethan shrugged. If you're going to fool the world, you might as well do it right. And if I refuse, he leaned in, his voice low. Then, I'll consider the deal broken. And just like that, she realized what she had signed up for. Not just a date to a wedding, but a performance. The etiquette coach, a stern older woman named Eleanor Whitmore, took one look at Olivia's posture and sighed. Goodness, child, have you ever held a champagne flute properly? Olivia groaned as Eleanor adjusted her grip. Ethan, watching from a distance, laughed. She's a lost cause, Eleanor. Olivia shot him a glare. You know, Lancaster, for someone who needs my help, you're not very encouraging. Eleanor arched an eyebrow at their bickering. Interesting chemistry between you two. Ethan immediately stiffened. Olivia's cheeks warmed. There's no chemistry, she said quickly. Absolutely none, Ethan added, almost too quickly. Eleanor just smiled. If you say so. By the time the training was over, Olivia was exhausted. As they drove back to Ethan's penthouse, she finally asked the question that had been gnawing at her. Why is this so important to you? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because Sophia needs to know. She didn't break me. Olivia stared at him, and for the first time, she saw something beyond the arrogance, something raw. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about revenge, and she had just become a pawn in his game. The air inside Veronique Atelier, one of Manhattan's most exclusive boutiques, was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and polished wood. The boutique was a world of its own, filled with racks of designer gowns and shimmering jewelry under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. Olivia stood awkwardly near the entrance, feeling as out of place as a street performer in an opera house. Miss Harper, a sleek, impeccably dressed woman, greeted her. Welcome. I'm Veronique, and today we're going to create magic. Before Olivia could respond, Veronique gave her a once-over, her critical eyes flicking from Olivia's worn-out jeans to her simple ponytail. We have our work cut out for us. Olivia bristled at the judgment, but bit her tongue. This was just part of the deal. She had to endure this parade of luxury for one reason, and one reason only: to survive. Ethan entered a moment later, radiating confidence as he strolled toward her, his piercing blue eyes scanning the boutique's selections. Let's get this over with, Olivia muttered. Ethan smirked. That's the spirit. The next few hours were exhausting. Dresses, accessories, shoes, nothing was left unexamined. Olivia was shoved into a series of extravagant gowns, some so tight she could barely breathe. At one point she tried to argue, I don't need to look like a damn princess. Ethan leaned against the dressing room doorway, arms crossed. You're not a princess, Olivia. You're a queen. And if we're going to sell this lie, you need to look the part. His words sent an unexpected chill down her spine, but she didn't let herself think about it. By the time Veronique deemed her worthy of the upper class, Olivia was exhausted. She stood before the full-length mirror, blinking at her reflection. A sleek black evening gown hugged her frame perfectly, the fabric flowing effortlessly to the floor. A pair of diamond earrings shimmered against her skin. Her wild brown curls had been tamed into soft waves, cascading over one shoulder. She barely recognized herself. Ethan stepped up behind her. Now you look the part. She turned to him. This still feels wrong. He shrugged. Perception is everything, Olivia. For a moment, she saw something in his expression, a flicker of something real. But before she could dwell on it, Veronique clapped her hands. We still have work to do. Olivia groaned. There's more. Oh, sweetheart, Veronique purred. This was the easy part. The next morning, Olivia found herself in a grand ballroom, standing before a severe-looking woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, Eleanor Whitmore. Posture is the foundation of elegance, Eleanor said, tapping Olivia's shoulders. Stand straight, chin up, shoulders back, again. For 3 hours, Olivia practiced how to walk, how to sip champagne without looking like an amateur, and, worst of all, how to smile without looking uncomfortable. Ethan sat on the sidelines, amused beyond belief. At one point, Olivia, fed up with the scrutiny, turned to him. Do you have to be here? Ethan smirked. I'm here for moral support. You don't have morals. He let out a laugh. Touché. After another grueling session of etiquette training, Olivia finally snapped. This is ridiculous, she burst out, throwing down a silver fork. Do people really care about which side of the plate the salad fork is on? Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Yes, she scowled. Then, those people have too much time on their hands. Eleanor for the first time chuckled. I like you, Miss Harper. Ethan smirked. Don't encourage her. But Olivia noticed something. Ethan Lancaster, the cold, arrogant billionaire, was laughing. And for the first time she wondered, was this the real Ethan? Or just another mask? That night, Ethan sent a car to take Olivia back to her apartment. But before she could leave, he stopped her. You did well today. She blinked. Are you actually complimenting me? He smirked. Don't get used to it. She studied him for a moment. Why are you doing all this? Ethan's smirk faded slightly. Because I need to win. His answer bothered her more than she expected. Because winning wasn't the same as moving on. And for the first time she realized Ethan Lancaster hadn't moved on at all. Back in her apartment, Olivia collapsed onto her tiny couch, exhausted. Margaret, her neighbor, knocked on the door, carrying a cup of tea. You look like you've been through war. Olivia sighed. Close enough. Margaret sat beside her. You know, the Ethan Lancaster I remember from the news was ruthless, cold. But the way you talk about him, it sounds like there's something more. Olivia hesitated. I don't know. Maybe. Margaret smiled knowingly. Be careful, dear. You're playing a game with a man who doesn't lose. The words lingered long after Margaret left. And as Olivia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she wondered, was she really playing the game? Or was Ethan Lancaster playing her? The evening air in Manhattan was crisp, the streets alive with the hum of traffic and the glow of city lights. But inside the sleek black Rolls-Royce, there was nothing but tense silence. Olivia sat frozen, staring at her reflection in the tinted window. She was unrecognizable. The stunning black evening gown draped over her frame like it had been made just for her. Her hair, no longer in a simple ponytail, cascaded in soft waves down her shoulder. Diamond earrings glinted against her skin, catching the dim glow of the car's ambient lighting. Yet beneath all the luxury, she felt like a stranger in her own skin. Across from her, Ethan sat with his usual air of detachment, adjusting the cuff of his custom-tailored suit. He was always impeccable, always in control. But tonight, there was something different, something unreadable in his expression. As the car pulled up in front of the Whitmore estate, the palatial venue where the wedding was being held, Olivia took a slow breath. This is it. There's no turning back. Ethan finally broke the silence. Remember what I told you? She nodded. Don't let them see fear. He smirked. Good girl. With that, he stepped out first, offering his hand. She hesitated. And then, as if stepping onto a stage, Olivia Harper became someone else. The second Olivia stepped out of the car, the world seemed to pause. Conversation stilled. Glasses froze mid-air. Every guest, every billionaire, socialite, and media mogul turned to look. For the first time in her life, Olivia felt the weight of true power. Ethan placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the entrance with effortless confidence. She didn't miss the way people's gazes lingered, their whispered speculations dancing in the air like electricity. Then she spotted her, Sophia Whitmore, the bride, the ex-fiancée. Draped in an extravagant white gown, Sophia stood beneath a cascade of floral arrangements, her hand wrapped around Nathan Caldwell's arm. But her eyes were locked onto Ethan. And then, subtly but unmistakably, they flicked to Olivia. For a split second, Olivia felt a flicker of doubt. What the hell am I doing here? But then, Ethan tightened his grip on her waist, pulling her closer. And Olivia realized this wasn't just a game. This was war. The grand ballroom shimmered with golden light, the clinking of champagne glasses blending with the soft hum of a live orchestra. Every inch of the venue screamed wealth, power, and exclusivity. Ethan and Olivia moved through the crowd like a force of nature. Men stared, women whispered, and Olivia? She did exactly what she had been trained to do. She smiled, she played along, and she owned the room. As they reached the main reception area, a familiar voice rang out. Ethan Lancaster. What a surprise! Sophia. The air between them crackled with tension as she approached, her pristine white dress billowing behind her like a queen making her entrance. Ethan's expression didn't falter. Sophia, congratulations. She smiled, but it was sharp, too sharp. And who's your lovely companion? Before Ethan could answer, Olivia stepped forward, extending her hand. Olivia Harper. It's a pleasure. The moment their hands touched, Olivia felt the pressure in Sophia's grip. A silent message, a silent test. She didn't flinch. Sophia smiled. Likewise. I must say, Ethan never mentioned you before. Ethan's smirk was dangerous. Some things are better kept private. The implication was clear. Sophia's eyes darkened, but she recovered quickly. Well, I do hope you enjoy the evening, Olivia. It's rare to see Ethan with someone so refreshing. Olivia matched her smile, refusing to blink. I intend to. As Sophia walked away, Olivia let out the smallest breath of relief. Ethan leaned down, his voice brushing against her ear. Not bad, Harper. She turned to him, eyes narrowing. I'm not your pawn, Ethan. He just smiled. Then prove it. As the night continued, Olivia found herself pulled deeper into Ethan's world. The guests were a whirlwind of power. CEOs, investors, politicians, people who could make or break lives with a signature on a contract, and somehow, Olivia held her own. Then came the dance. Ethan extended his hand. Dance with me. Olivia hesitated. Ethan, trust me. She didn't trust him, but she took his hand anyway. As they stepped onto the dance floor, the music slowed. Ethan led effortlessly, his movements smooth, practiced, dominant. Olivia struggled at first, stumbling slightly. Relax, he murmured, his voice a low whisper against her ear. You're doing fine. She took a deep breath. And suddenly, it wasn't so hard anymore. They moved together, the tension shifting, morphing into something else, something dangerous. For a moment, Olivia forgot about the crowd, about Sophia, about everything. All she felt was Ethan, watching her, guiding her. And then, a new voice cut through the moment. Mind if I steal her for a dance? Nathan Caldwell. Ethan's jaw tightened. But before he could object, Olivia surprised herself by stepping away. She turned to Nathan, offering him a small smile. I'd be honored. She didn't see Ethan's face as she walked away, but she felt his eyes on her, burning. Dancing with Nathan was different. Where Ethan was calculated, Nathan was relaxed. You're very good at this, Nathan said. But you don't belong here, do you? Olivia stiffened. Excuse me? Nathan's smile was too knowing. Ethan doesn't bring people into his world unless they serve a purpose. Be careful, Miss Harper. You're playing with fire. Olivia kept her expression neutral. Maybe I like fire. Nathan let out a low chuckle. I hope so. Because Ethan Lancaster, he doesn't lose. The song ended, and Olivia pulled away. When she turned, she saw Ethan across the room, and he looked furious. The night ended with more questions than answers. As they left the wedding, Ethan's grip on Olivia's waist was tighter than before, and as the car pulled away, Olivia felt something shift. This wasn't just a deal anymore. This was something else, something dangerous, something inevitable. And Olivia Harper? She wasn't sure if she was ready. But she knew one thing for certain, neither was Ethan Lancaster. The aftermath of the wedding lingered like the faintest trace of perfume, unseen but impossible to ignore. As the Rolls-Royce glided through the streets of Manhattan, Olivia sat in silence, her fingers grazing the cool fabric of her gown. Across from her, Ethan Lancaster looked equally distant, his face unreadable, as the city lights reflected off his sharp features. Finally, he spoke. "You handled yourself well tonight." His voice was calm, measured, almost too neutral. Olivia turned her head, meeting his gaze. "Did I?" Ethan's lips curled into something between a smirk and a grimace. "You managed to charm my enemies and unsettle my ex in one night. I'd say that's an accomplishment." Olivia exhaled, leaning back against the leather seat. "Well, glad to be of service." Ethan studied her, the amusement fading from his face. "You danced with Nathan." There it was, the first crack in his perfect control. Olivia crossed her legs, feigning indifference. "I didn't realize that was against the rules." Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he rolled his shoulders, as if trying to shake off an invisible weight. "He's not as charming as he seems." "And you are," Olivia countered. For a moment, Ethan looked like he wanted to say something else. But then, with a single breath, he shut it down. "Just be careful who you trust." Olivia held his gaze for a beat longer, before looking away. Because deep down, she wasn't sure if that warning was meant for Nathan Caldwell or for himself. By the time Olivia woke up the next morning, the wedding was already making headlines. Every major socialite blog, tabloid, and media outlet had something to say about it. But most importantly, they had something to say about her. Who is Olivia Harper? Ethan Lancaster attends ex-fiancée's wedding with a stunning mystery woman. Revenge or romance? Billionaire introduces new love interest. But is she who she claims to be? Olivia scrolled through the articles, her stomach tightening. This wasn't just speculation. This was scrutiny. Her personal life, her background, her entire existence was suddenly under a microscope. She barely had time to process it when her phone rang. "Ethan." She hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "What? Have you seen the news?" His voice was sharp, but not exactly angry. "Hard to miss." Ethan let out a slow breath. "You're going to need to get used to this." Olivia sat up, gripping the phone. "You mean the rumors? Or the idea that my life no longer belongs to me?" There was a pause. "Both." She swallowed, staring out the window. "Do you regret it? Bringing me there?" Ethan's response was immediate. "No." Her breath caught. "But I do need you to play the role better," he added, his tone shifting. "This isn't over yet, Harper." Olivia closed her eyes. Of course it wasn't. That afternoon, Olivia walked into Ethan's penthouse to find him waiting. The entire room was bathed in golden light, the floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a sprawling view of Manhattan's skyline. He stood by the bar, two glasses in front of him, one already filled with whiskey. "Drink?" he offered. "Not in the mood for poison today," she shot back. Ethan smirked. "It's just whiskey." Olivia walked over, but she didn't take the drink. "What do you want, Ethan?" He studied her for a moment before speaking. "You made an impression last night." "Was that not the point?" "Yes." He swirled his drink, his gaze unwavering. But now, people want to know more. They're asking questions, and that means we need to give them answers." Olivia folded her arms. "So what? More appearances? More events where I have to pretend to be something I'm not?" Ethan took a slow sip, before setting his glass down. No, Olivia. More events where you have to prove you belong. The words hit harder than she expected. She wanted to argue, to say that she didn't need to prove anything. But the truth was, he was right. She wasn't just playing a game anymore. She was in the middle of it. Later that evening, Olivia was alone in the penthouse when the doorbell rang. Confused, she opened the door, only to find herself face to face with Sophia Whitmore, the bride herself. Dressed in an elegant designer coat, Sophia stepped inside without waiting for permission. "I assume Ethan isn't here," she said smoothly. Olivia shut the door behind her, crossing her arms. "If you're here to mark your territory, don't bother. I'm not interested in whatever power struggle you two have going on." Sophia let out a soft, amused laugh. "Oh, Olivia, you have no idea what you've walked into, do you?" Olivia narrowed her eyes. "Enlighten me." Sophia took a step closer. "Ethan doesn't bring people into his world unless he has a use for them. And you? You're just the latest pawn on his chessboard." Olivia clenched her fists. "And you're bitter because you lost." Sophia smiled, but there was something cold behind it. "Sweetheart, I didn't lose. I walked away. But you?" She tilted her head. "You're just another disposable piece in his empire. And when he's done with you?" A beat of silence. "You'll be nothing." Olivia held her ground. "Then I guess we'll have to see who outlasts who." Sophia's lips curled. "We will." And with that she left, leaving Olivia shaken but not broken. That night, Olivia found Ethan waiting for her. He leaned against the marble kitchen counter, arms crossed. "You had a visitor today." She didn't look away. "I can handle Sophia." Ethan studied her for a long moment before exhaling. "She won't stop, you know." Olivia smirked. "Neither will I." For the first time now, Ethan actually looked impressed. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Then, let's show them, Harper. Let's show them they were wrong about both of us." Olivia met his gaze, feeling the shift in the air. This wasn't just a deal anymore. This was war, and she wasn't backing down. The morning after the wedding should have been uneventful. But Olivia learned quickly that nothing in Ethan Lancaster's world was ever quiet. Her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, more headlines, more rumors, and more scrutiny than she ever thought possible. Who is Olivia Harper? Ethan Lancaster's new mystery woman, shakes high society. Maid to Millionaire's date. A real Cinderella story, or a carefully orchestrated scheme. Olivia Harper. From cleaning floors to dancing with the elite. Olivia's stomach twisted as she read the headlines. Some articles painted her as an overnight sensation, a mysterious, beautiful woman who had seemingly captivated Ethan Lancaster. Others, however, were far less forgiving. The whispers had already begun. Who is she? Where did she come from? What does she want? The reality was simple. They weren't questioning Ethan's motives. They were questioning hers. It didn't take long before the consequences of the night before reached Ethan's business world. At precisely 9 a.m., Olivia was called into his office at Lancaster Enterprises. When she entered, Ethan was seated behind his desk, his sharp blue eyes scanning through reports, a deep frown creasing his forehead. "We have a problem," he said without looking up. Olivia crossed her arms, standing tall. "Just one? Because from what I've seen, there are about a dozen headlines making me out to be either a social climber or a fraud." Ethan exhaled, setting the papers down. "Some of my investors are questioning your involvement with me. They think you're either manipulating me or trying to leverage our association for personal gain." Olivia stiffened. "Are you serious? I didn't ask for any of this." That doesn't matter, Ethan said smoothly. What matters is perception. She narrowed her eyes. And what exactly do you plan to do about it? Ethan leaned back in his chair, assessing her. I need to control the narrative. Olivia's jaw clenched. So let me guess. You want me to disappear? Let the story die. Ethan's expression hardened. Number, I want you to play along. She froze. Play along. If we act defensive, it makes it look like we have something to hide. But if we own the story, if we show that we're not ashamed of our connection, we take away their power. Olivia's heart pounded. And what exactly does owning the story mean? Ethan's lips curled into a small, knowing smirk. It means making them believe you belong here. By noon, Olivia was already feeling the pressure. Ethan arranged for a strategic public outing, a high-profile charity event that evening, where they would be seen together, looking unfazed by the media storm. The message was clear. Olivia Harper isn't just a temporary distraction. She's here to stay. But not everyone was pleased. As Olivia was stepping into her car, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Unknown. Careful where you stand. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. She knew exactly who it was from. Sophia. Of course she wasn't done yet. Sophia had tried to rattle her at the wedding. Now, she was making it clear. This was a game Olivia wasn't supposed to win. Olivia's fingers tightened around the phone. She wasn't backing down. By evening, Olivia found herself in another designer gown, standing beside Ethan in front of hundreds of flashing cameras. She kept her posture perfect, her expression calm. If they wanted her to look like she belonged, she was going to make damn sure they had no reason to doubt it. As they walked into the ballroom, Ethan leaned in. Relax, you're doing fine. She exhaled. I can't tell if you're reassuring me or yourself. Ethan smirked. Maybe both. The event was filled with Manhattan's elite, CEOs, politicians, socialites. Olivia moved through the crowd, carefully navigating conversations, avoiding traps. Then, just as she was starting to feel in control, she saw him, Nathan Caldwell, and beside him, Sophia Whitmore. Of course. Sophia caught her gaze, her lips curving into a mocking smile. Nathan, however, had his sights set solely on Olivia. He approached smoothly, his eyes glinting with intrigue. Olivia Harper. We didn't get a chance to finish our dance the other night. Ethan, standing beside Olivia, immediately stiffened. Olivia smiled politely. I believe the song ended, Mr. Caldwell. Nathan chuckled. Call me Nathan. After all, we might be seeing more of each other. Ethan's voice was like steel. Not likely. Nathan ignored him, his attention still on Olivia. I have to admit, you've handled all of this better than I expected. But tell me, how much of this is real? Ethan's jaw clenched. Enough. Sophia suddenly appeared, looping an arm through Nathan's. I have to agree with Nathan. You're playing the part well, Olivia. But how long can you keep up the act? Olivia smiled sweetly. As long as necessary. Sophia's eyes flashed. Careful, dear. You're walking a very thin line. And when Ethan decides he's done with you, what then? Silence hung in the air. Olivia lifted her chin. Then, I'll still be standing. But tell me, Sophia, what will you be? For the first time, Sophia didn't have an answer. By the time the event ended, Olivia was exhausted. She and Ethan returned to his penthouse in silence, the weight of the evening pressing down on them. But just as she was about to excuse herself, Ethan turned abruptly. Did you enjoy talking to Nathan? Olivia blinked, startled. Excuse me? His jaw tightened. You seemed comfortable enough around him. Olivia laughed, incredulous. Are you serious? I spent the entire night being scrutinized, and that's what you're fixated on. Ethan took a step closer, eyes dark. I don't like him around you. Olivia exhaled sharply, her patience snapping. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I sign a contract saying I belong to you? His expression darkened. That's not what I... Then what, Ethan? What am I to you? Silence. For the first time, he had no answer. And Olivia? She had had enough. You know what? She said coldly. Forget it. Whatever game this is, I don't want to play anymore. She turned, walking away. But as she reached the door, Ethan's voice stopped her. I don't want to lose you. She froze. Her heart hammered. Slowly she turned back. Then prove it. And with that, she walked out, leaving Ethan standing alone. For the first time truly afraid of losing her, Olivia Harper didn't look back as she walked away from Ethan Lancaster's penthouse that night. Not once. Her heart pounded in her chest, her pulse racing with a mix of emotions, anger, disappointment, and something dangerously close to heartbreak. But she refused to let herself feel weak. By the time she reached her apartment, the city lights outside her window seemed brighter than usual. Maybe it was because, for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had control over her own life. The next morning, Olivia woke up with renewed determination. No more waiting for Ethan's approval. No more playing a role in his twisted games. No more being a pawn in someone else's life. She had spent too long living in his world. Now, she was going to build her own. With what little savings she had left, Olivia poured herself into something that had always been in the back of her mind, designing interiors that blended elegance with sustainability. She had spent years cleaning other people's homes, seeing firsthand what worked, what didn't, and how to create a space that felt like home, not just a showroom. And so she started small. A few pieces here and there, a couple of small commissions from old acquaintances. At first, it was slow, frustratingly slow. There were days she doubted herself, nights she lay awake, wondering if she had made a mistake, walking away from the financial security Ethan offered. But then, something happened. Margaret Hayes, her kind and perceptive neighbor, noticed her work. Margaret was the type of woman who had seen everything. A former journalist turned community leader, someone who had an eye for talent. One evening, she visited Olivia's apartment, looking around at the small but beautifully crafted designs Olivia had been working on. You've got something here, Olivia, Margaret said, sipping her tea. Olivia sighed, rubbing her temples. It doesn't feel like enough. Margaret raised an eyebrow. You're thinking like a maid, not a businesswoman. The question isn't whether you're good enough. It's whether you believe you deserve success. Those words stuck with Olivia. For so long, she had been in survival mode. Now, she had to learn how to thrive. While Olivia was finding her footing, Ethan was losing his. For years, Ethan Lancaster had been untouchable, unshakable, unstoppable. But without Olivia, something shifted. At first, he pretended he didn't care. He told himself she was just another person who had come and gone in his life. But deep down, he knew better. And so did the people around him. It started subtly. At board meetings, he was distracted. At social events, he was restless. In private, he was angrier than usual, snapping at his staff for the smallest mistakes. Then came the business problems. Investors, the same ones who had questioned Olivia's place at the wedding, began murmuring about Ethan's instability. If he was reckless in his personal life, could he be trusted in business? And just as Ethan's foundation began to crack, Sophia made her move. Sophia Whitmore had always played the long game. She had been waiting for the right moment to strike. After Olivia left, Sophia wasted no time spreading rumors. At one exclusive investors' dinner, she leaned in close to an influential businessman and planted the seed of doubt. "Ethan's distracted," she said smoothly, twirling her champagne glass. "And when he's distracted, he makes mistakes." It didn't take long before whispers turned into full-blown speculation. A week later, a critical investor pulled out of a major project. Then, another. And another. Ethan didn't see it coming. By the time he realized what was happening, his entire empire was at risk. Meanwhile, Olivia's designs started gaining traction. A local design blogger featured her work, calling it a fresh take on modern elegance with a soul. Then, a well-known interior design firm reached out, asking her to collaborate on a project. Olivia could hardly believe it. Her, a former maid, now sitting in a high-end office, discussing design concepts with industry leaders. It was surreal. And then, just as she was beginning to think she had truly moved on, she saw the headlines. The news broke like a thunderstorm over Manhattan. Ethan Lancaster, facing financial crisis, multiple investors pull out inside the downfall of a billionaire. Has Lancaster lost his touch? Sophia Whitmore's play. Did she outsmart her ex-fiancé? Olivia read the headlines in shock. For so long, Ethan had seemed untouchable. But now, he was falling. And worse, she knew exactly who was behind it. She wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her wanted to stay out of it. But another part of her, the part that had once cared for Ethan, couldn't help but wonder. Was he finally learning what it felt like to lose everything? Olivia was just finishing up a design meeting when her phone rang. Unknown caller. She almost ignored it, but something told her to pick up. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A long silence. Then, his voice. "Olivia." She froze. It was Ethan. And he sounded different. Not arrogant. Not angry. Just tired. "I need to see you," he said. Olivia's heart pounded. "Why?" A heavy pause. Then, the words that changed everything. Olivia Harper never thought she would wake up one day and find her name in the headlines, not as a scandal or gossip piece, but as a rising star in the design world. Yet, here she was, sitting in her small studio apartment, scrolling through her phone. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the latest article from New York Design Weekly. A visionary in the making, Olivia Harper's unique approach to modern interior design captivates the industry. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the phone down. It had been a whirlwind of weeks since she left Ethan Lancaster's world behind. And against all odds, she was making it on her own. No billionaire backing her. No lavish lifestyle to rely on. Just her talent, her hard work, and a refusal to let anyone define her worth again. The moment should have been purely victorious, yet a nagging thought crept into the back of her mind. Why did she still feel like Ethan's shadow was following her? Meanwhile, Ethan Lancaster sat in his office, staring at that same article, her name, her success, all without him. The irony wasn't lost on him. For years, he had believed that he was the one who shaped people's lives, molding them, controlling them, discarding them when they no longer served a purpose. But Olivia? She had proven him wrong in every possible way. She had walked away from his money, his power, his influence, and instead of falling apart, she had risen higher than ever before. His jaw clenched as he scrolled through more articles, more interviews. Olivia Harper's work redefines elegance with authenticity. The former maid turned interior designer, an inspiring journey. Former maid. The word stung more than he expected, because Olivia was never just his maid, and maybe, deep down, he had always known that. Sophia Whitmore wasn't the kind of woman who accepted losing, and seeing Ethan so bothered by Olivia's success only fueled her desire to destroy her. She had underestimated Olivia before. She wouldn't make that mistake again. At an upscale cocktail party in the heart of Manhattan, Sophia leaned in close to an influential investor, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "It's funny, isn't it? How fast some people rise." The investor raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Sophia gave a small, calculated smile. "Well, considering her past with Ethan, one has to wonder, was it really talent, or was it something else?" The investor shifted uncomfortably, intrigued, yet cautious. Sophia continued, her voice lower now. "I mean, let's be honest. Ethan doesn't just hand out opportunities. What if Olivia wasn't just a maid? What if she was something more? Private?" The suggestion hung in the air, venomous and precise. It wouldn't take long before the rumors began to spread. The next morning, Olivia woke up to a flood of messages on her phone. Some congratulatory, some not so kind. Her stomach twisted as she read one particular headline: "Ethan Lancaster's former maid, more than just a designer." A cold shiver ran down her spine. What did they mean? Her heart pounded as she clicked the article. And then she saw it. Speculation, innuendo, insinuations that she had used her relationship with Ethan to climb the ranks. They were calling her a gold digger, a kept woman who had played her cards right, a nobody who had been given an opportunity she didn't deserve. Her hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just about her reputation. It was about everything she had worked for. Ethan slammed his phone down, his blood boiling as he read the latest gossip. This wasn't some random media attack. This had Sophia's fingerprints all over it. He had played her games before. He knew how she worked. And this time, she had crossed the line. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and stormed out of his office. He needed to see Olivia. When Ethan showed up at Olivia's door, she wasn't surprised. She had expected him to come. But what did surprise her was how different he looked. For the first time in forever, Ethan Lancaster looked tired, weary, and maybe just a little bit lost. She crossed her arms. "What do you want, Ethan?" His jaw tensed. "You know exactly why I'm here." She shook her head. "If this is about the rumors, don't bother. I can handle them." His gaze darkened. "You shouldn't have to." A beat of silence passed between them. Then, softer this time, Ethan said, "I'm sorry." Olivia inhaled sharply. She wasn't sure what startled her more, the words themselves or the fact that they actually sounded genuine. But she wasn't ready to let him off the hook that easily. "Sorry for what, Ethan?" His expression turned raw. "For everything. For not defending her sooner. For letting Sophia get away with this. For not realizing how much he had already lost." That night, Olivia made a decision. She wasn't going to be a victim. She wasn't going to let Sophia or the media or anyone else dictate her worth. She had fought too hard for this. And now, she was going to fight back. Olivia had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. The media storm had grown wilder, crueler, and more vicious than she could have imagined. Gossip pages were filled with fabricated stories. Ex-maid turned designer. Was she always Ethan's favorite? Sleeping her way to the top? The Olivia Harper scandal. Social media was a battlefield. Supporters praised her talent. Haters tore her apart. Her inbox was flooded. Clients hesitated. Investors stalled. And through it all, Olivia held her ground. Because she knew the truth. And she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. For once in his life, Ethan Lancaster wasn't thinking about his business. He wasn't thinking about profits, deals, or investors. He was thinking about Olivia, how he had let this happen, how he had failed her, and he wasn't going to let her fight this alone. His assistant, Daniel, hesitated as he approached. "Sir, are you sure about this?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes, call a press conference." Daniel blinked. "You realize this could backfire?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't care." Because this time, he wasn't doing this for himself. He was doing it for her. The conference room was packed. Journalists filled every seat. Cameras flashed. And standing at the podium was Ethan Lancaster, powerful, untouchable, and ready for war. He cleared his throat. "Let's get one thing straight." The room fell into silence. Olivia Harper did not use me, manipulate me, or scheme her way into success. Everything she has, she built with her own hands, and anyone suggesting otherwise is lying. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A journalist raised his hand. "Mr. Lancaster, if that's true, why was she seen at your wedding to Sophia Whitmore?" Ethan's gaze darkened. "Because I was a fool. I dragged her into a game she never agreed to play, and she walked away. I deserved that. But I won't stand by while her name is dragged through the mud." More whispers, more questions, then the bombshell. And for the record, Ethan's voice was steady. "I love her." Gasps, camera flashes, reporters scrambled to take notes. Ethan met the stunned eyes of the press. "Print that." And then he walked off stage. The moment Olivia saw the news, she dropped her coffee. She stared at the screen, heart racing. Ethan had done the one thing she never expected. He had stood up for her. And worse, he had said he loved her. That night, there was a knock at Olivia's door. She knew who it was before she even opened it. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, looking more uncertain than she had ever seen him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then softly, "You didn't have to do that." Ethan exhaled. "Yes, I did." She swallowed hard. "Ethan, you can't just—" "I meant it." His voice was firm. She stilled. "Meant what?" Ethan took a step closer. "Everything. That you didn't deserve this. That I should have protected you and—" His voice dropped. "That I love you." Olivia's heart pounded. This was the moment she had waited for. And yet, could she trust it? She searched his face. "Ethan, I don't know if I can believe you." Pain flashed in his eyes, but he nodded. "Then let me prove it." While Olivia wrestled with her emotions, a different battle was happening in the background. Rebecca Monroe, the relentless journalist, had been digging. And she had found something. Sophia Whitmore hadn't just spread the rumors. She had orchestrated everything, paid tabloids, planted fake stories, manipulated sources, and worse, she had been behind Olivia and Ethan's original breakup, all those years ago. Rebecca published her exposé that morning. The headline was brutal. Sophia Whitmore's Web of Lies, How a Socialite Destroyed Lives for Power. Screens exploded with the story. Sophia was finished. But for Olivia, for the first time in weeks, she could breathe. That night, Ethan found Olivia again. This time, he didn't speak. He just held out his hand. No grand speeches, no manipulations, just an invitation. To trust him, to let him try. And slowly, cautiously, Olivia took his hand. Olivia woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing uncontrollably. She rubbed her eyes, still groggy from the emotional whirlwind of the past few days. But as she reached for her phone, her heart dropped. Hundreds of missed calls, thousands of notifications, and the name plastered all over the internet? Heron. She clicked on the first article she saw. Sophia Whitmore exposed. How she orchestrated the biggest social scandal of the year. Her breath hitched. It was over. The truth was finally out. Across the city, Sophia Whitmore was living a nightmare. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her PR team was in full meltdown mode. Her name was everywhere, and not in the way she liked. Headlines screamed betrayal, deception, and scandal. Investors pulled out. Fashion brands severed ties. Even the socialites that once fawned over her now avoided her calls. She had played the game, and she had lost. Ethan Lancaster sat in his office, staring at the headlines. He should have felt satisfied, but all he felt was exhausted. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something bigger, about righting the wrongs and making sure Olivia was safe. Daniel, his assistant, walked in. "Sir, the press is asking for a follow-up statement." Ethan didn't look up. "Tell them I have nothing more to say." Daniel hesitated. "And Olivia?" Ethan exhaled. "She's made it clear she doesn't trust me yet." A pause. Then softly, "So, I'll just have to prove myself?" That afternoon, Olivia received an unexpected call. Rebecca Monroe, the journalist who had uncovered everything. "Olivia, we need to talk." Olivia hesitated. I don't know if—" "Listen," Rebecca interrupted. "I don't want a scandal. I want your story. The truth. No edits. No gossip. Silence." Then Olivia took a deep breath. "Okay, let's do it." The cameras were set. The lights were bright. And across from Olivia sat Rebecca Monroe, the woman who had exposed Sophia's web of lies. The studio was silent. Then, "Rebecca." "Olivia, tell us your side of the story." Olivia folded her hands in her lap. "I never wanted this attention. I just wanted to do my job. But then Ethan Lancaster asked me to pretend to be his date, and suddenly, my life changed." Rebecca nodded. "And when did you realize you were being used?" Olivia exhaled. "From the very beginning." She looked into the camera. But what Sophia didn't expect was that I wasn't just some girl she could erase. I fought back. I walked away. And I built my own future. Rebecca smiled. "And now?" Olivia straightened. "Now, I don't owe anyone an explanation. I define myself." The interview aired that night. Oh, and the response? Explosive. The public turned against Sophia completely. Olivia was praised for her honesty and resilience. Ethan's reputation was restored. And just like that, the tables had turned. Ethan watched the interview from his penthouse. He had never been prouder of Olivia. She didn't need him to fix this. She had fixed it herself. But that didn't change one thing. He still loved her. So he made a decision. One final chance. One last attempt to prove himself. And this time, if she walked away, he would let her go. Olivia was in the middle of packing when she heard it. A knock, a familiar one. Her heart knew before she even opened the door. Ethan. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at her like she was the only thing that mattered. She crossed her arms. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" His voice was steady. "I needed to see you." A pause. Then, not to fix anything, not to explain anything, just to say that I'm sorry, and that I meant every word I said. She blinked. Every word, every single one. Silence. Then Olivia exhaled. "I don't know if I can trust you, Ethan." He nodded. "Then don't. Just let me prove it." And for the first time, she considered it. Ethan Lancaster sat in his boardroom, staring at the sea of cold, calculating faces. His company, Lancaster Enterprises, was on the verge of collapse, and he knew exactly why. Nathan Caldwell, Sophia's new husband, the man who had stolen everything from him, and now wanted to take the rest. "Ethan, let's be honest," one of the board members said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your recent decisions have made our investors uneasy." Ethan exhaled. Uneasy. Because I chose integrity over corruption? Another man, older, leaned forward. It's not just about your choices, Ethan. It's about your reputation. A pause. And let's be real. You've been distracted. Ethan's jaw clenched. He knew what they meant. They meant Olivia. They meant the woman who had forced him to change. And in their eyes, that made him weak. But they had no idea. She was the only thing keeping him strong. Meanwhile, across the city, Olivia Harper was thriving. Her interior design business had exploded. Orders were pouring in. Big brands were calling. And she had done it all without Ethan. She sat in her office, flipping through a contract from a luxury real estate company. A multi-million-dollar project, a dream come true. Margaret Hayes, her mentor and friend, grinned. You did it, kid. Olivia smiled, but something felt off. Margaret noticed. It's Ethan, isn't it? Olivia looked away. I don't know if I can trust him. Margaret studied her. Do you want to? Silence. Then, yes. And that was the problem. That night, Ethan was called into an emergency board meeting. He walked in, already knowing something was wrong. And then he saw who was sitting at the table. Nathan Caldwell, his enemy, his rival, his downfall. What the hell is he doing here? Ethan demanded. Nathan smirked. Oh, come on, Ethan. Don't look so surprised. He turned to the board. Gentlemen, I believe we all agree that Lancaster Enterprises needs stability. A leader with focus. A CEO who understands the bigger picture. The board members nodded. Ethan felt his stomach drop. They were going to force him out. They were going to give his company to Nathan. They were going to erase him. And then Nathan delivered the final blow. Ethan, step down voluntarily, and maybe, just maybe, I won't bury you. The room was silent. Everyone was watching, waiting. Ethan clenched his fists. Then, go to hell. Olivia was about to sign her contract when she saw it. The news. Ethan Lancaster facing company takeover. Rival Nathan Caldwell, set to take control. Her heart stopped. Margaret read over her shoulder. If Nathan wins, Ethan loses everything. Olivia swallowed hard. I need to see him. Margaret grabbed her arm. Olivia, be sure. He's already hurt you once. Olivia nodded. I know. A deep breath. But this time, I won't let him hurt himself. Ethan was in his office, pouring himself a drink, when the door burst open. Olivia. Her eyes were fierce, determined. And Ethan? He was just tired. Olivia, what are you doing here? She crossed her arms. I could ask you the same thing. Since when do you give up? He laughed bitterly. Oh, I don't know. Maybe since my entire company turned against me? She stepped forward. Number. You don't get to do this. You don't get to throw everything away. He met her gaze. Olivia, I already lost you. She exhaled. And now you're going to lose everything else. Ethan turned away. Then, Olivia said the one thing that shattered him. The Ethan I knew would fight. Silence. Then, he turned back around. And for the first time in weeks, Ethan Lancaster decided to fight back. The next morning, Ethan walked into the final board meeting. Nathan was already sitting at the head of the table smirking. The board members looked at Ethan expectantly, waiting for him to surrender. He didn't. Instead, he placed a thick folder on the table. Before we go any further, I'd like to present evidence. Nathan's smirk faltered. The board looked at each other, confused. One of them opened the file. Inside, documents exposing Nathan's illegal financial dealings. The entire room froze. Nathan turned pale. This is ridiculous, he stammered. Ethan leaned forward. Is it? Because I think the SEC will find it very Interesting. The board members whispered amongst themselves. Then, one of them spoke. Nathan, is this true? Nathan tried to deny it, but it was too late, and within minutes, his empire crumbled. The meeting ended. Nathan was escorted out. The board turned to Ethan. Mr. Lancaster. What now? Ethan exhaled and made the one decision no one expected. I'm stepping down. Silence. Wait. What? Ethan smiled. I've spent my whole life fighting for control. And now, I'm done. He stood up, shook hands, and walked out, a free man. That evening, Olivia was in her studio when she heard it. A knock. She opened the door. Ethan. No suit, no power, just him. She crossed her arms. What now? He smiled. I did it. She raised an eyebrow. Did what? I let go. A pause. Then, now, I just need to know if you'll let me stay. Her heart pounded. Then, she grabbed his collar and kissed him. The morning air in New York felt different. For the first time in years, Ethan Lancaster wasn't a CEO. He wasn't the man in control. He was just Ethan. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Olivia Harper wasn't sure what to expect. Ethan had walked away from his empire, from everything that defined him. And now, here he was, standing in her small studio, looking completely at peace. She eyed him cautiously. You really did it? Ethan nodded. Yeah. Silence stretched between them. Then, Olivia exhaled. So, what now? Ethan chuckled. I was hoping you'd have an idea. She raised an eyebrow. You expect me to map out your future? He shrugged. You're better at designing things than I am. Olivia rolled her eyes. Your life isn't a renovation project, Ethan. Ethan smirked. Maybe not, but I know one thing. I don't want to build it alone. Her heart skipped a beat. Olivia crossed her arms. Ethan, let's be clear about something. He straightened. All right. She took a deep breath. I won't be a rebound. I won't be a prize you win. And I definitely won't be a replacement for your old life. Ethan nodded slowly. I wouldn't want you to be. She studied him, searching for any trace of the old Ethan, the man who played games, manipulated people, controlled everything. But for once, he looked genuine. Good, she finally said. Then let's take this slow. Ethan smiled. Slow sounds good. And for the first time, Olivia felt like she wasn't being pulled into his world. He was stepping into hers. Later that week, Ethan found himself in an unfamiliar position. He was jobless. And oddly enough, he didn't hate it. For the first time in years, he wasn't waking up to 100 emails and phone calls. There were no investor meetings, no press conferences, no crisis management. Instead, he was sitting in a coffee shop, staring at a blank notebook. For the first time, he had to figure out what he actually wanted. And that was terrifying. You look lost. Ethan glanced up. Margaret Hayes stood there, holding a steaming cup of tea. Ethan glanced up. Margaret Hayes stood there, holding a steaming cup of tea. She took a seat across from him. You're not used to this, are you? Ethan chuckled. Not even a little. Margaret studied him. So, what's next? Ethan sighed. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? She smirked. Well, lucky for you. I don't charge for advice. Ethan leaned forward. All right, Margaret. What do you think I should do? She sipped her tea. You spent years chasing power, Ethan. Maybe it's time to chase something real. Ethan frowned. Like what? Margaret smiled. Like purpose. Meanwhile, Olivia's career was thriving. Her work was getting attention. Her inbox was filled with partnership offers. And now, she had to decide if she wanted to expand. Urban Deco Designs, the firm that once rejected her, was now offering a collaboration. It was everything she had ever wanted. But something felt off. Margaret, ever the wise mentor, raised an eyebrow. You don't seem excited. Olivia sighed. I should be. Margaret smirked. Let me guess, Ethan? Olivia hesitated. It's not just him. It's me. I worked so hard to build something of my own. And now, I feel like if I take this step, I'll lose control again. Margaret nodded. Then don't let them take control. Olivia stared at her. Margaret leaned forward. You're not the same girl you were a year ago, Olivia. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Not Ethan. Not Urban Deco. Not even yourself. You've already made it. And for the first time, Olivia started to believe it. That evening, Ethan and Olivia met at a small park near her apartment. She told him about the offer, about her fears, about the weight of it all. Ethan listened quietly, then said something that surprised her. Then don't do it. Olivia blinked. What? Ethan shrugged. If it doesn't feel right, then don't do it. You don't owe anyone anything. She stared at him. That's ironic coming from you. He smirked. I'm learning. She smiled, shaking her head. I can't believe you just told me to walk away from an opportunity. Ethan tilted his head. Would you rather I tell you what to do? Olivia exhaled. No. Then, thank you. Ethan frowned. For what? She smiled. For listening. And somehow that meant more than anything. A week later, Olivia made her decision. She walked into the Urban Deco Designs office. The executive smiled, expecting her to sign the deal. Instead, she slid the contract back to them. I appreciate the offer, but I'll be doing things my way. They blinked. Excuse me? Olivia smiled. I'll collaborate, but on my terms. For the first time, she wasn't asking. She was demanding, and they respected that. She walked out with her head held high. She had finally taken control. That night, Ethan showed up at Olivia's studio with pizza and cheap wine. She raised an eyebrow. Is this your version of a celebration? He grinned. Only the best for you. She shook her head but let him in. They sat on the floor, eating straight from the box, laughing. It was simple. It was real. It was everything Ethan had never known he needed. And when the laughter faded, he looked at her. Really looked at her. I'm proud of you, Olivia. Her heart skipped. And in that moment, she realized something. She was proud of herself, too. Ethan glanced up. Margaret Hayes stood there, holding a steaming cup of tea. She took a seat across from him. You're not used to this, are you? Ethan chuckled. Not even a little. Margaret studied him. So what's next? Ethan sighed. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? She smirked. Well, lucky for you. I don't charge for advice. Ethan leaned forward. All right, Margaret. What do you think I should do? She sipped her tea. You spent years chasing power, Ethan. Maybe it's time to chase something real. Ethan frowned. Like what? Margaret smiled. Like purpose. Meanwhile, Olivia's career was thriving. Her work was getting attention. Her inbox was filled with partnership offers. And now, she had to decide if she wanted to expand. Urban Deco Designs, the firm that once rejected her, was now offering a collaboration. It was everything she had ever wanted. But something felt off. Margaret, ever the wise mentor, raised an eyebrow. You don't seem excited. Olivia sighed. I should be. Margaret smirked. Let me guess, Ethan? Olivia hesitated. It's not just him. It's me. I worked so hard to build something of my own. And now, I feel like if I take this step, I'll lose control again. Margaret nodded. Then don't let them take control. Olivia stared at her. Margaret leaned forward. You're not the same girl you were a year ago, Olivia. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Not Ethan, not Urban Deco, not even yourself. You've already made it. And for the first time, Olivia started to believe it. That evening, Ethan and Olivia met at a small park near her apartment. She told him about the offer, about her fears, about the weight of it all. Ethan listened quietly, then said something that surprised her. Then don't do it. Olivia blinked. What? Ethan shrugged. If it doesn't feel right, then don't do it. You don't owe anyone anything. She stared at him. That's ironic coming from you. He smirked. I'm learning. She smiled, shaking her head. I can't believe you just told me to walk away from an opportunity. Ethan tilted his head. Would you rather I tell you what to do? Olivia exhaled. No. Then, thank you. Ethan frowned. For what? She smiled. For listening. And somehow that meant more than anything. A week later, Olivia made her decision. She walked into the Urban Deco Designs office. The executive smiled, expecting her to sign the deal. Instead, she slid the contract back to them. I appreciate the offer, but I'll be doing things my way. They blinked. Excuse me? Olivia smiled. I'll collaborate, but on my terms. For the first time, she wasn't asking. She was demanding, and they respected that. She walked out with her head held high. She had finally taken control. That night, Ethan showed up at Olivia's studio with pizza and cheap wine. She raised an eyebrow. Is this your version of a celebration? He grinned. Only the best for you. She shook her head but let him in. They sat on the floor, eating straight from the box, laughing. It was simple. It was real. It was everything Ethan had never known he needed. And when the laughter faded, he looked at her. Really looked at her. I'm proud of you, Olivia. Her heart skipped. And in that moment, she realized something. She was proud of herself too. Trust takes time. Ethan Lancaster had earned a chance, but he hadn't earned Olivia Harper's heart. Not yet. And tonight, he was about to put everything on the line. Would his grand gesture prove his sincerity? Or was this just another calculated move from a man who once controlled everything? Olivia had spent the past week buried in work. Ever since accepting Ethan's investment, she had thrown herself into expanding her studio, preparing new designs, and avoiding any unnecessary distractions, especially him. So when a sleek black envelope arrived at her office, she hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single card, written in Ethan's sharp, elegant handwriting. Meet me at Lancaster Tower tonight, at 8 p.m. No obligations, just come. Olivia frowned. What was he up to? That evening, Olivia hesitated outside Lancaster Tower. It had always been a symbol of power, a monument to Ethan's ambition. But tonight, something was different. As she stepped inside, she gasped. The once cold corporate lobby had been transformed. Soft golden lights illuminated the space. Elegant greenery and art installations filled the walls, each piece carrying a message of sustainability and renewal. It was her vision, her ideas, and Ethan had brought them to life. A familiar voice broke the silence. You said trust isn't built overnight. She turned. Ethan stood at the center of the room, dressed in a sharp navy suit, his hands in his pockets, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. So I didn't just want to tell you I've changed, Olivia. I wanted to show you. Ethan led Olivia through the building, revealing every detail of what he had done. A design department dedicated to sustainable architecture, named after her late mother, an entire floor devoted to mentoring young, underprivileged designers. A shift in Lancaster Enterprises' mission, from power to purpose. Olivia was stunned. She ran her fingers over a blueprint with her own design. Ethan, this is... She trailed off, unable to find the words. He watched her carefully. I did this because of you, Olivia. Because you showed me a different way. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to ask the real question. Why now, Ethan? He exhaled, looking away for a moment. Then softly, because I don't want to be the man I was. Despite the overwhelming beauty of what Ethan had done, doubt still lingered. Was this just another way to win her over? Was he expecting something in return? As if reading her mind, Ethan turned to her. I don't expect anything from you, Olivia. He stepped closer. This isn't a deal. It's not a bargain. It's just what I should have done a long time ago. She searched his expression, looking for even the slightest trace of manipulation. But for the first time, she saw none. They stood in silence, the weight of everything between them pressing down. Then, Olivia spoke first. I was terrified, Ethan. His brows furrowed. Of what? She exhaled. Of falling for you. Ethan's expression softened. And are you still afraid? She hesitated. Then finally, I don't know. For the first time, Ethan laughed. A genuine relieved laugh. That's a start. The night was far from over. As they walked through the newly designed rooftop garden, Ethan suddenly held out his hand. Dance with me. Olivia raised an eyebrow. You dance? Ethan smirked. Only when it matters. A soft instrumental melody played through the speakers. As he pulled her into his arms, Olivia felt something shift. For once, there was no power struggle, no games, just two people standing on equal ground. As they swayed under the stars, Olivia finally let herself breathe. And in Ethan's eyes, she saw something she had never expected. Not power, not control, not arrogance, but love. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to believe in it, the culmination of everything. For months, Olivia Harper had kept her heart guarded. She had seen Ethan Lancaster's transformation, watched as he reshaped his empire, shifted his priorities, and proved time and time again that he was no longer the man she once resented. But could she finally let go of the past? Could she trust him completely? Tonight, she would have her answer. The grand opening of Lancaster Tower's new sustainable division was one of the most anticipated events of the year. Industry leaders, investors, and top-tier designers filled the exquisitely designed ballroom. But tonight, Olivia was the star. Ladies and gentlemen, the host announced, please welcome the creative visionary behind tonight's achievement, Ms. Olivia Harper. A wave of applause filled the rooms as Olivia stepped onto the stage. Her black satin dress shimmered under the lights, but her focus was only on the crowd. This was her moment. She took a deep breath and began. This project is more than just architecture. It's proof that sustainability and luxury can coexist. It's a symbol of change. As she continued, her gaze briefly met Ethan's. He was standing at the front of the crowd, his expression filled with something deeper than admiration, pride, love. After the speech, Olivia excused herself, needing a moment to breathe. She walked out onto the balcony, where the city stretched before her in endless lights. She didn't hear Ethan approach until he spoke. You stole the entire night, Olivia. She turned to see him, his hands tucked in his pockets, watching her with an unreadable expression. You make it sound like I planned that. She smirked. That's what makes it even better. A comfortable silence settled between them. Then, suddenly, do you know what I regret the most? She frowned. What? Ethan exhaled. Not telling you sooner. That I loved you. Her breath caught. But before she could speak, he took a step closer. I love you, Olivia. Not because I need you. Not because I want to prove something. But because you are the only person who has ever made me want to be better. Her heart pounded. Ethan, Wait. He held up a hand. Let me finish. His voice shook slightly. You once told me love isn't about control. And you were right. That's why. Ethan suddenly dropped to one knee. Olivia gasped. A small black box appeared in his hands. Inside, nestled against velvet lining, was a simple yet stunning platinum ring. No diamonds, no excess, just elegance, just her. I don't want to own you, Olivia. I want to stand beside you. Olivia stared at him. This was it. Her decision. She had spent so long running from her feelings, so long questioning whether Ethan Lancaster was someone she could truly trust. And yet standing here tonight, looking at the man before her, she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. She knew her answer. A slow, brilliant smile spread across her lips. Then, yes. The crowd erupted in cheers as Ethan slipped the ring onto Olivia's finger. As he stood, she threw her arms around him, laughing softly against his chest. You really love dramatic gestures, huh? She teased. He grinned. Only when they work. Their wedding was not the grand affair the press had expected. Instead, a small, intimate ceremony in a breathtaking vineyard. Only family, closest friends, and a few trusted colleagues. No business deals, no headlines, just two people who had found their way to each other. As Olivia stood before Ethan, the officiant asked, Do you, Olivia Harper, take Ethan Lancaster? She met Ethan's eyes, and without a single doubt, I do. But their story didn't end there. Over the next several years, Olivia's design firm flourished, earning global recognition. Ethan fully transitioned his empire into ethical, sustainable ventures. Together, they founded Harper Lancaster Initiatives, a mentorship program for young designers. They didn't just build a business, they built a legacy, one based on trust, respect, and second chances. One evening, years later, Olivia stood on the rooftop garden of Lancaster Tower. The sunset painted the sky in hues of gold, casting a glow over the city below. Ethan approached, slipping his arms around her waist. Thinking about something? He murmured. She smiled. About how far we've come. Ethan pressed a kiss against her temple. And we're just getting started. She turned to him, love shining in her eyes. Together? He grinned. Always? And that, my friends, is how a story of heartbreak, redemption, and unexpected love unfolds. But now, I have a question for you. Do you think Olivia was right to take a chance on Ethan? Was his transformation genuine, or was it just another calculated move? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm curious to see if you'd have made the same choice. And if you love stories that make you feel something, stories that remind us that second chances aren't just for fairy tales, then hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because trust me, the next story, it's going to take you on a whole new ride. See you in the next one. Blast off, Sparkles.